The year is 64 AD. A violent storm batters the coastline near Rome, where ancient cypress trees bend like supplicants before the wind's fury. Rain lashes against the stone walls of a secluded villa with relentless percussion, while thunder rolls deep in the earth's belly, shaking the very foundations. Yet inside these walls there exists a profound stillness that defies the chaos beyond. A single oil lamp flickers on a heavy oak desk, casting dancing shadows across shelves lined with dusty scrolls. The air carries the scent of burning olive oil, aged parchment, and the metallic fragrance of rain seeping through weathered shutters. In this pool of warm, trembling light sits an old man, his face mapped with the geography of countless worries, yet his eyes hold a tranquility that seems impossible given the political terror of Nero's Rome. He writes with deliberate strokes, the scratch of his quill against papyrus, the only sound that rivals the storm's symphony. His name is Lucius Annaeus Seneca, and though he addresses his letters to a young friend named Lucilius, tonight, across the vast abyss of time, he writes to you. You who lie there in the darkness of your own room, listening to the storms of your restless mind. You whose thoughts race like the wind outside this ancient villa, whose chest carries the weight of unspoken fears and smouldering angers. You who are tired in a way that sleep does not easily touch, who scroll through the infinite abyss of the internet seeking solace you cannot name. Seneca understands. He knows the peculiar torture of consciousness that will not rest, the way the mind becomes its own tyrant when darkness falls. Tonight we sit beside him in this flickering candlelight. We let the storm rage outside while we learn to build an unshakable fortress within. The room holds a peculiar stillness now, doesn't it? Shadows from the street lamp outside carve slow, geometric patterns against your ceiling, while the distant hum of modern life, refrigerators murmur, heating systems breath, the muffled sound of traffic that never truly sleeps creates a symphony of ambient solitude. Your body carries the deep cellular exhaustion that comes from another day of performance and obligation, yet your mind refuses the mercy of unconsciousness. It races instead, cycling through worn grooves of worry like a needle stuck on a damaged record, playing the same discordant notes until you want to scream into the darkness. This is the burden of consciousness, that peculiar torture of being human when the world has given you permission to rest, yet rest will not come. During daylight hours, you can outrun yourself through work, conversation, and glowing screens. But here, in this stillness, there is nothing left between you and your own mind. And your mind, untrained and undisciplined, is not gentle. It becomes a courtroom where you serve as prosecutor, defendant, and judge, reviewing evidence of your inadequacies with merciless precision. Every minor embarrassment replays in high definition. Every unfinished task magnifies into catastrophe. Every uncertain future branches into elaborate architectures of anxiety, constructing cathedrals of dread with the meticulous detail of a master architect. Perhaps you reach for your phone, that glowing rectangle of infinite destruction, seeking something to quiet the noise inside your skull. But the blue light only amplifies your wakefulness, and the endless stream of curated lives makes you feel more alone, more behind, more fundamentally insufficient. You are tired of being tired, exhausted by the very effort of trying to sleep. Caught in the paradox that consciousness itself has become a kind of punishment. What you may not know, lying there in your particular darkness, is that 2,000 years ago, in a villa outside Rome, a man named Lucius Annaeus Seneca experienced this same torment. Do not imagine him as a marble statue of serenity, frozen in perpetual wisdom. Imagine instead an older man, his joints aching from political stress, his breathing laboured from chronic asthma, lying awake while the world slept. He too felt his mind turn against him in the quiet hours, churning through political anxieties, philosophical questions, and the endless inventory of human frailty. Seneca wrote of the noise of the soul, that inner clamour that persists even when the city falls silent. He understood that your sleeplessness is not personal failing, but universal human condition. The mind, evolved to solve problems and scan for danger, naturally gravitates towards suffering when left unguided. Your anxiety is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is evidence that you are exquisitely, painfully human, carrying the heavy inheritance of consciousness that can contemplate both stars and its own extinction. He discovered something crucial. Philosophy is not abstract academic exercise, but practical medicine for the soul, written from intimate understanding of nocturnal pain. His letters were composed not in ivory towers, but in the trenches of lived experience, exile, political terror, physical illness, and yes, those long dark nights when sleep refused to come. He wrote for people like you, the overthinkers, the anxious, the lonely ones who carry invisible weights that no one else can see. The true tyrant, Seneca realized, is not external circumstance, but the untrained mind. Your thoughts replay old scenes as if repetition could alter the past. Rehearse future catastrophes as if imagination could prevent them. Your nervous system responds to these mental phantoms as if they were real threats, your heart racing from battles that exist only in the theatre of memory and anticipation. But here is what transforms this burden into possibility. The same intensity that keeps you awake can, if guided, become the source of profound clarity. Seneca's peace was not given by circumstance. His life was violent, unstable, full of danger. His tranquility was crafted painstakingly, thought by thought, from the raw material of restless consciousness. Tonight, rather than fighting your wakefulness, begin by naming it for what it is. Not insanity or weakness, but the unguided power of human awareness. You are not failing, you are merely unpracticed at befriending your own mind. Across the vast abyss of centuries, others have walked this path of midnight vigilance and found their way through. This chapter is a letter to you, a hand placed quietly on the shoulder of your racing thoughts. The burden you carry has been carried before, and if others have transformed that burden into wisdom, then perhaps, slowly, quietly, you can learn to do the same. In the year 41 AD, Seneca stood on the deck of a creaking ship, watching the Italian coastline dissolve into mist and memory. Before him stretched Corsica, a harsh, windswept island of jagged cliffs and indifferent seas. Rome, with its marble forums and philosophical salons, vanished beneath the horizon as imperial decree carried him toward 8 years of banishment. The specific crime, an alleged affair, mattered less than the political convenience of his removal. He would spend nearly a decade on that desolate rock, separated from everything familiar, condemned to a geography that felt like punishment incarnate. Yet this ancient exile becomes mirror for your modern predicament, lying there in the darkness of your own room. You need not be banished to a distant island to understand the crushing weight of displacement. There exists a more insidious form of exile, the exile of the soul that occurs not through imperial decree but through the slow accumulation of compromises, performances and surrenders that distance you from your own authentic nature. Consider your daily existence. You move through crowded offices, bustling cities, endless digital connections, yet carry a profound sense of being fundamentally out of place. You perform competence while your inner world crumbles, laugh at jokes that do not amuse you, maintain relationships that quietly wound you. Each day requires shape-shifting to remain acceptable, creating ever-widening distance between your outer performance and inner truth. You scroll through curated lives on glowing screens, those digital islands of performed happiness, and feel not connection but deepening awareness of your own displacement. This psychological exile is perhaps more cruel than geographical banishment because it offers no clear antagonist to blame, no emperor whose death might restore you to yourself. The displacement is ambient, diffuse, a chronic low-grade fever of the soul rather than acute crisis. You are surrounded by people yet feel perpetually foreign, speaking a language no one quite understands, carrying customs that seem outdated or inexplicable to those around you. Seneca, marooned on his rocky island, initially raged against his fate. But gradually, through years of enforced solitude, he discovered something revolutionary. External location matters infinitely less than the landscape of your mind. True exile is not geographical, but psychological, being estranged from yourself while never leaving your hometown. The most profound banishment occurs when you abandon your own company. Treating your inner life like a dangerous neighborhood you dare not walk through alone. He learned to distinguish between loneliness and solitude, two territories that appear similar but offer vastly different experiences. Loneliness is the poverty of self, the ache of disconnection, the feeling of being unseen and unknown. Solitude, however, is the richness of self, the cultivation of internal companionship, the practice of being present to your own experience without constant validation from outside sources. In loneliness, you are abandoned. In solitude, you are accompanied by the most important person you will ever know. This distinction offers radical hope for your midnight wakefulness. Your insomnia might be your soul's rebellion against a life of perpetual performance. Its refusal to rest in circumstances that feel fundamentally misaligned with your deepest nature. The racing thoughts are not malfunction, but message. You are homesick for a version of yourself you have abandoned, exiled from your own authenticity by fear, obligation, or the gradual erosion of boundaries you once held sacred. Seneca used his island exile not to mourn what he lost, but to cultivate an inner kingdom no emperor could confiscate. He discovered that if you cannot be good company for yourself, no paradise will satisfy you. Conversely, if you learn to inhabit your own mind with grace, no prison can truly contain you. Tonight, reframe your bedroom. It is not a cell of isolation, but a sanctuary of solitude. You are not cut off from the world, you have stepped back from its madness to commune with your own consciousness. The journey back from exile begins not with changing circumstances, but with learning to be a friend to the person you are alone with. Accepting your racing thoughts as guests in your inner house who simply need acknowledgement before they quiet down. In this company, your own company, you are finally, mercifully, home. Picture the marble corridors of Nero's palace at dawn, where shadows stretch like fingers of dread across polished floors. The year is 59 AD, and the air itself carries the metallic taste of paranoia. Behind gilded doors, a young emperor plots his mother's murder, while courtiers smile with trembling lips, each knowing that favor can transform to fury between one heartbeat and the next. Through this labyrinth of whispered treasons and calculated genuflections walks Lucius Annaeus Seneca, philosopher, playwright, the most powerful man in Rome save one, and perhaps the most endangered. His position defies all logic, all possibility of peace. As philosopher, he is sworn to truth, virtue, the examined life that bends toward wisdom. As advisor to Caesar, he must navigate the brutal choreography of power, where principle becomes liability and honesty invites assassination. He teaches stoic detachment while his own neck remains perpetually exposed to imperial whim. He writes letters about freedom while imprisoned in a court where freedom is the one currency no one possesses. Every morning brings the possibility that this day will demand his suicide, that the boy he tutored will order the opening of his veins as casually as requesting wine with dinner. This is not distant history. This is the architecture of your own captivity, refracted through the lens of centuries. You too serve impossible masters, don't you? Perhaps it is the career that slowly devours your principles, demanding you perform competence in meetings, while your soul screams that this work builds nothing, serves nothing, means nothing beyond the digital numbers accumulating in accounts that never feel like enough. You smile and nod and contribute to projects that compromise everything you once believed about how life should be lived. Or perhaps your chains are more intimate, the relationship that requires you to diminish yourself to maintain peace. The financial obligations that bind you to circumstances you would flee if freedom were possible. The iron grip of your own anxious thoughts that dictate every choice through fear, rather than desire. The modern world creates exquisite traps more effective than iron. You are free, theoretically, yet bound by invisible constraints, student debt that stretches into decades, healthcare tethered to employment, social expectations that feel like gravity itself. The algorithmic prison of your phone knows your weaknesses better than you know yourself, feeding you carefully calibrated doses of outrage and envy. You can leave, technically, yet the cost of leaving feels insurmountable. So you stay, and staying corrodes something essential. And the corrosion keeps you awake, wondering who you might have been if circumstances permitted authenticity. Seneca understood this peculiar torture of constrained existence. Yet from within his golden cage, as the sword of Damocles swayed above his head with each imperial mood swing, he discovered something that transforms victimhood into agency. While we cannot control external circumstances, we retain absolute sovereignty over our judgments and reactions. This is not motivational platitude, but revolutionary insight with practical power to transform your sleepless nights. He called it the inner citadel, that unconquerable fortress of the mind where your essential self remains inviolate regardless of what happens to your body, your bank account, your reputation. The emperor could command his presence, confiscate his wealth, eventually order his death. But Nero could not dictate Seneca's interpretation of these events, could not colonize the private territory where meaning is made and dignity is maintained. The chains that bind you are partly circumstance, yes, but also interpretation. You believe you must stay in the job that exhausts you, the relationship that diminishes you, the city that suffocates you. But belief is not fact. You assume your worth depends on achievement, that rest equals laziness, that admitting struggle means failure. But assumptions can be examined, questioned, dismantled like the philosophical constructs they are. If Seneca could cultivate tranquility while walking daily through the palace of a paranoid emperor, perhaps you can find peace in your particular prison. Your insomnia might be your soul's refusal to rest in chains. Its demand that you examine which constraints are real and which are stories you tell yourself about what is possible. Tonight, lying in the darkness, feel your breath moving in and out of your chest. That rhythm belongs to you, ungoverned by any external authority. The wisdom forged under pressure differs from wisdom born in comfort. It is tested, tempered, proven against actual difficulty rather than theoretical challenge. Seneca's philosophy was not academic exercise but survival strategy, medicine developed in the laboratory of lived desperation. When the final order came, when Nero demanded his suicide, Seneca met forced death with such composure that his executioners trembled more than he did. Even in captivity, even facing death, he remained free where it mattered most, in the sovereign territory of his own mind. That same territory belongs to you, unclaimed and waiting, as close as your next conscious breath. Feel the weight of your body against the mattress now, and notice what it carries. Is there a subtle tension threading through your jaw, as if you are still bracing against words spoken hours ago? Do your shoulders hold themselves slightly raised, like ramparts defending against some invisible siege? There is a heat radiating from somewhere deep in your chest, not the warmth of contentment, but the smouldering ember of indignation that refuses to be extinguished by the cool darkness of your room. This is anger's architecture made manifest in flesh and bone. The physical blueprint of an emotion that Seneca called brief insanity. Picture him in a Roman villa at twilight, watching through marble columns as a slave drops a precious glass cup. The master erupts, face contorting into something barely recognizable as human, veins bulging at his temples like rope-pulled taut. Voice rising to a pitch that sounds less like language than animal howl. In that moment, Seneca sees not just a man losing control, but a structure being revealed, the hidden architecture of anger, laid bare like the skeleton of a collapsing building. For anger is indeed a constructed thing, built hastily in the mind from specific materials, wounded pride, violated expectations, and the arrogant fantasy that the world should conform to your personal sense of order. It has foundations, supports, recognizable patterns, if you learn to look with the lamp of philosophical inquiry rather than the torch of righteous indignation. Turn your attention inward now, to the phantom arguments conducting their nightly performance in the theatre of your skull. Perhaps today someone dismissed your contribution in a meeting, their casual disregard cutting deeper than any deliberate insult. Or your partner said something thoughtless, and hours later you are still composing devastating responses you will never deliver. Maybe it is the larger, more diffuse rage at political injustice, at algorithmic machinery that reduces human complexity to engagement metrics, at a world that seems designed to reward cruelty and punish kindness. Your anger feels righteous, doesn't it? It feels like the only sane response to insanity, appropriate reaction to genuine wrong, and perhaps the initial spark contains justice. But notice what happens next. Notice how your mind replays the offense, each repetition adding new details, sharpening edges until the original incident becomes monument to everything wrong with your existence. The person who wronged you lives rent-free in your consciousness, occupying premium real estate while you lie here in darkness, heart racing, fists clenched against sheets that have done nothing to deserve such violence. Here lies Seneca's revolutionary insight, forged in the furnace of Roman political life, where unchecked anger meant death. Anger is not natural response, but choice. a judgment about being wronged that you could choose not to make. This seems impossible at first, almost insulting. The wrong happened. The injustice is real. How can you choose not to be angry? But examine anger's construction more carefully. Someone acts. You interpret their action as deliberate offense against you. You judge that you have been diminished, disrespected, harmed. You conclude that the offender deserves punishment. Each of these is a decision point, a place where the architecture could be built differently. The colleague who dismissed you, were they attacking you specifically, or drowning in their own insecurity, lashing out from pain you cannot see? The partner who spoke thoughtlessly, did they intend cruelty, or were they distracted by invisible struggles, stumbling through darkness just as you are? Even genuine malice, when examined with philosophical precision, often reveals itself as suffering seeking company. Wounds trying to wound, the hurt trying to distribute their hurt across a wider territory. Your body cannot distinguish between real threat and imagined offense. When you replay the argument, rehearse the confrontation, fantasize about vindication, your nervous system responds as if danger is present and immediate. Cortisol floods your bloodstream, your heart rate elevates, muscles tense for fight or flight. But there is no actual threat here in your bedroom, only the ghost of one, and you are doing battle with phantoms while your body pays the physiological price of wars that exist only in memory and imagination. Seneca offers practical techniques, medicine developed in the laboratory of lived desperation. The pause, that sacred space between provocation and response where freedom lives. When anger rises, deliberately wait, count to 10 to 100 if necessary, feel the heat of it without acting from it. This is not suppression but observation, watching anger like weather moving through the landscape of consciousness. He recommends stepping outside yourself, viewing the situation as if watching a play. There you are, face flushed, voice raised, dignity abandoned, over what? An email? A comment? A slight that tomorrow will be forgotten by everyone except you? From this distance, anger often reveals itself as absurd, disproportionate response to minor provocation, the ego throwing a tantrum because the world refused to arrange itself according to its preferences. Most practically, soften your face deliberately when anger rises. The connection between facial expression and emotion runs both directions. Feelings shape face, but face also shapes feelings. Unclench your jaw now. Relax your forehead. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. The anger, deprived of its physical scaffolding, begins to dissipate like smoke without fuel. Tonight, visualize that hot coal of resentment you have been carrying. Feel its heat, its destructive potential, burning only your own palm. Now, slowly, with infinite gentleness toward yourself, open your fingers. Let it drop into the deep, cool well of night. Watch it fall, glowing red, then dimming, then turning to cold, harmless ash as it descends into darkness. Anger is a luxury you cannot afford if you wish to sleep. It is architecture that imprisons its architect, a fortress that crushes its builder beneath the weight of its own violence. You need not forgive everyone tonight, nor solve the injustices of the world before dawn. You need only put down the weapon that is cutting your own hands. The battle is over. The fortress can be quietly dismantled brick by brick, expectation by expectation, until only peace remains where rage once stood. Let the anger go, not because the offense wasn't real, but because carrying it costs more than it's worth. Your sleep is more precious than your grievances. Your peace is more valuable than your pride. There is a particular hour of the night when fear changes its texture, isn't there? Earlier, it was noisy, anxious thoughts darting like startled birds through the corridors of your consciousness. But now, as the world sinks deeper into silence, fear grows heavier, more suffocating. Like fog thickening over a dark sea. You feel it settling into the hollow of your chest with familiar weight, anger's shadow twin, slipping beneath the door like cold draught. If anger is the fire that consumes the present, then fear is the ice that freezes the future, spreading frost across every possibility until tomorrow becomes a minefield you must somehow navigate without map or compass. Seneca knew this visitor intimately. In the marble corridors of Nero's palace, where paranoia hung in the air like incense, he lived with constant possibility of exile, torture, execution. Yet from this crucible of genuine terror, he discovered something that still stares directly at you through the centuries. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. The anticipation of pain almost always exceeds the pain itself. Most disasters we rehearse with such meticulous detail never actually arrive at our door, and when they do, we discover resources for endurance we could not imagine while drowning in anticipatory dread. Turn your attention to the fears keeping you awake right now. Perhaps it is the presentation looming at week's end. Your mind already constructing elaborate scenarios of humiliation, stammering before judgmental faces, technology failing at crucial moments, your inadequacy exposed for all to witness. Or maybe it is the medical appointment you have been postponing, your imagination transforming minor symptoms into terminal diagnosis. The relationship that feels unstable, the financial precipice you navigate monthly, the aging parent whose mortality you cannot bear to contemplate. Each fear branches into infinite variations, creating entire forests of dread from single seeds of uncertainty. Your brain, magnificent and terrible in its capacity for simulation, cannot distinguish between thought and threat. Evolution shaped your nervous system for a world where rustling grass might conceal predators, where immediate physical danger required instant response. But modern life offers different terrors, abstract, distant, often imaginary. And your ancient alarm system responds to spreadsheets and social obligations as if they were saber-toothed tigers. The amygdala fires, cortisol floods your bloodstream. Your heart races to escape dangers that exist only in the theater of anticipation. You are being attacked by drawings on the walls of your own mind.
Modern anxiety is often a form of arrogance. The belief that you can predict the future with perfect accuracy, that if you just worry intensely enough, you can force reality to bend to your will. But the future is vast, complex, filled with variables you cannot see. By fixating on worst-case scenarios, you blind yourself to infinite other possibilities. The neutral outcomes, the surprising turns of luck, the hidden opportunities within difficulty, the simple fact that things often resolve themselves in ways we could never have anticipated.
Fear, Seneca teaches, is often fiction rehearsed so frequently it feels like prophecy. Your anxious mind becomes unreliable narrator, casting you as victim in dramas that exist only in the space between your ears. Most of what we fear is not the event itself, but our reaction to it. We fear we will not be able to bear the misfortune. Yet examine your own history. How many catastrophes have you survived that once seemed unsurvivable? You stand now as living evidence that feared futures either never arrived or did arrive and did not destroy you. He recommends gentle interrogation when fear arrives. Question it with calm curiosity rather than panic. What specifically am I afraid of? Is this responding to actual present danger or imagined future threat? What evidence supports this fear? Has this fear proven reliable in the past, or does it cry wolf with exhausting regularity? When you say, "I fear I will lose my job," examine each link in that chain of assumptions. The entire sequence is far less inevitable than it feels at 3 in the morning when fear has free rein over your undefended consciousness. Your racing thoughts tonight might be the accumulated debt of a day spent never fully present. Your attention fractured across infinite inputs. Fear thrives in this fragmentation, building its castles in the gaps between conscious attention. But here, now, in this moment, you are breathing, your heart beats, the sheets hold you. Nothing in this immediate, actual present requires the terror you are experiencing. Let fear speak if it must, but do not let it rule. Acknowledge its presence without obeying its commands. It is voice, not truth, suggestion, not prophecy. Ancient alarm system firing at shadows, doing its evolutionary duty, but you, the consciousness observing the fear, need not be commanded by it. You are larger than your fear, more resilient than your worry believes. The shadow of tomorrow cannot hurt you from where it sleeps, unformed, beyond the horizon of dawn. Only the present moment exists, and in this present moment you are safe enough to close your eyes, to let the breath deepen, to release your grip on futures that have not arrived and may never come. There comes a moment, somewhere between midnight and dawn, when exhaustion stops being merely physical and becomes a condition of the soul itself. You know this territory intimately, your body heavy against the sheets, eyes burning with fatigue. Yet your mind continues its restless patrol, standing guard against every unresolved problem as though vigilance alone could prevent disaster.
You have become a house with no doors, where any passing anxiety can wander in uninvited, rearranging the furniture of your peace, keeping you awake with its unwanted presence. This is precisely where Seneca begins his most revolutionary construction project. Living in the heart of Nero's Rome, surrounded by political terror and imperial madness, he discovered that physical walls offered no protection against the world's true invasions: fear, rage, the opinions of others, the endless noise of uncontrollable circumstances.
True safety, he realized, required different architecture entirely. A fortress built not of stone and mortar, but of reason, patience, and disciplined attention. He called this sanctuary the inner citadel, and tonight, in the quiet laboratory of your imagination, we will build it together. Picture yourself standing in a vast internal landscape, holding the raw materials of your own consciousness. The first stones you lay are hewn from reason, not cold logic that dismisses emotion, but warm rationality that examines thoughts with gentle precision. These foundation stones settle deep into bedrock, creating a base that external storms cannot erode. Each stone represents a moment when you chose observation over reaction, when you felt panic rising and paused instead of being swept away by the flood. The walls rise slowly, mortared with patience, the profound understanding that all storms eventually pass, that time is the great solvent of intense emotion. This mortar binds your defenses together, flexible enough to absorb fortune's shocks without cracking. As the ramparts grow higher, you create a defended space where external triggers lose their power to command you. The criticism that felt like assassination attempt becomes mere words. The failures that seem to define you shrink to their proper proportion, single moments in a vast lifetime, lessons rather than verdicts. Within these walls lies a quiet garden, a private domain where no one can enter without your explicit invitation. Here the air is golden and still. The noise of the world becomes distant murmur, muffled by stone and distance. This is the seat of your true self, the awareness that observes thoughts without being consumed by them, that can witness fear without obeying its commands. You are not your bank account, your job title, your racing thoughts, or your history of mistakes. You are the consciousness that watches all these things from the safety of the tower. Seneca built his citadel stone by stone during years of genuine terror, maintaining this inner sanctuary while Nero's madness escalated and Rome burned both literally and metaphorically. When courtiers trembled and philosophers fled, he cultivated a space where imperial whim could not penetrate. This was not natural gift, but deliberate practice. Architecture of consciousness constructed through daily return to what he could actually control. Your bedroom tonight can transform from battlefield to gateway to this inner stronghold. Feel yourself withdrawing from the perimeter where you have been standing guard against tomorrow's imagined disasters. Walk through the heavy oak doors of your fortress and hear the iron bolt slide into place with a satisfying thud. The world can rage outside, let anxiety pound at the gates, let worry scale the walls. It does not matter. The foundation is secure. This retreat is not built through force, but through gentle, persistent practice. When your attention wanders beyond the walls, chasing fears into hostile territory, you simply notice this wandering without judgment and guide your awareness back home. Each conscious return strengthens the citadel. Each choice to inhabit your defended space rather than scatter across the landscape of anxiety makes the fortress more real, more capable of sheltering you. Inside these walls, you are sovereign of your own kingdom. The external world has no jurisdiction here. As you lie in the darkness, imagine your very bed as the innermost chamber of this keep, your pillow as the throne from which you observe the night's thoughts without being commanded by them. Let the drawbridge up. Let the fires burn low. You are home now, protected in the unconquerable fortress of your own disciplined attention, where sleep becomes not escape from yourself, but return to your truest sanctuary. Here, finally, the battle is over. Here, you can rest. There exists a practice so seemingly perverse, so contrary to every instinct screaming within your anxious chest, that when you first encounter it, it feels like philosophical cruelty. Here you lie, already tormented by catastrophic thoughts that spiral through your consciousness like vultures circling carrion. And now an ancient Roman suggests you should deliberately invite more disasters into your mind. The practice is called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, and it represents perhaps the most counterintuitive medicine Seneca ever prescribed for the restless soul. Picture him in the pre-dawn darkness of his villa, while Rome still sleeps beneath a canopy of stars. Before the day's political machinations claim him, before he must navigate the treacherous waters of Nero's court, he sits in simple woolen robes and begins his morning ritual. With the methodical precision of a surgeon, he contemplates the worst that could befall him. Today I may lose a friend. Today I may be insulted, betrayed, exiled. Today I may fall ill, lose my wealth, perhaps even face death itself. But notice, he does not dwell on these possibilities with panic or morbid fascination. He examines them with the calm curiosity of a philosopher turning a gem in lamplight, asking, if this came to pass, could I endure it? What would remain of me that fortune cannot touch? This is not the anxious rumination that keeps you awake, that endless structureless spiral of worry that accomplishes nothing but exhaustion. Your mind rehearses catastrophe anyway: job loss, relationship collapse, illness, humiliation. But it does so chaotically, without purpose, like a broken record, playing the same discordant notes until you want to scream into your pillow. Seneca transforms this natural tendency into deliberate practice, giving structure and purpose to what would otherwise be mere torment. Modern culture has taught you the opposite approach entirely. You are instructed to visualize only success, to maintain relentless positivity, to push away negative thoughts as if they were infectious diseases. But what is denied in daylight returns at night with sharpened teeth. The fears you refuse to examine grow monstrous in the shadows, acquiring terrible power precisely because you will not look at them directly. You are like someone who refuses to open the closet door, convinced the hanging coat is a demon because it has never been investigated. Premeditatio malorum is the gentle opening of that door. Tonight, with infinite tenderness toward yourself, invite one fear, just one, to step forward from the crowd of anxieties clamoring for attention. Perhaps it is the job loss that would expose the fragility of your carefully constructed existence. Feel the initial shock of imagined termination, the shame burning in your chest as you clear your desk. But do not stop there, as your panicked mind usually does. Continue the visualization past the catastrophe into what comes after. You wake the next morning. Breath still enters and exits your lungs. The sun rises with sublime indifference to your employment status. You discover that your worth was never actually contained in your job title, that dignity persists even when circumstances collapse. Walk through the subsequent days in your imagination, some difficult, marked by financial stress and identity crisis. But notice what else emerges. Time you had forgotten existed. Conversations too long postponed. Possibilities that were invisible while you remained trapped in the familiar. Even in this imagined disaster, you remain fundamentally yourself, still capable of thought, love, adaptation, the small pleasures that constitute actual living. This practice functions as psychological inoculation. By exposing yourself to controlled doses of imagined catastrophe, your mind develops immunity to shock. When you have already walked through the valley of shadow in meditation, the actual valley, if it comes, holds fewer terrors. You have been there before. You know the terrain. Most crucially, you know that you can cross it and emerge on the other side still breathing, still capable of finding meaning in whatever remains. Apply this medicine to the relationship you cling to as if it were oxygen itself. Imagine its ending. The painful conversations, the division of shared possessions, the loneliness that would follow. But continue beyond the immediate devastation. You learn to sleep alone again. You rediscover the person you were before this union, or discover entirely new aspects of yourself. You find that while love is precious, it was never the sole source of your existence. You were whole before, you can be whole again. Consumer culture has intensified our terror of loss by insisting we need endless accumulations to be complete. We grip our possessions, achievements, relationships like someone holding a delicate glass too tightly. The very desperation to avoid breakage makes breakage more likely. But when you acknowledge that everything is temporary, when you hold your life lightly while still cherishing it deeply, you can finally appreciate the way it catches the light right now. Your insomnia might stem from this very grip, from trying to control the uncontrollable by staying awake to guard it. But you have walked through the fire in imagination and emerged still standing. The disaster has lost its power to ambush you. The terrifying unknown has become a known manageable quantity. So tonight, whisper gently to your racing thoughts, even if the worst happens, I will still be me. I will still have my capacity for reason, for dignity, for beginning again. Feel the vigilance slowly release its hold. The guard can finally stand down. You have rehearsed the loss and discovered that what remains, your essential self, cannot be confiscated by any fortune. In this knowledge, sleep becomes possible at last. All through the day, you carry an invisible ledger in your mind, columns of tasks that multiply like living things, obligations that breed in the darkness of your consciousness, imagined expectations that grow heavier with each passing hour. Your heart beats 100,000 times without your supervision. Your lungs draw breath after breath with sublime indifference to your worry. Cells divide and wounds heal through processes so intricate that the greatest minds can only marvel at their complexity. Yet here you lie, convinced that if you just think hard enough, plan thoroughly enough, anticipate every catastrophe with sufficient precision, you might finally secure your chaotic existence against the fundamental uncertainty of being human. This is the exhausting arrogance of consciousness, the belief that everything, absolutely everything, falls within your jurisdiction if you simply refuse to stop trying. Seneca, standing in the marble corridors of a collapsing empire, watching senators destroy themselves with the impossible task of controlling emperors, distilled this universal human predicament into a single revolutionary insight: there are things that are up to you and things that are not. The simplicity is deceptive, almost insulting to your sophisticated anxiety. But examine this distinction with the precision it deserves, and you discover it cuts through the thickest knots of sleeplessness like a blade through silk. What is actually up to you? Your judgments about what happens, your values in the face of circumstances, your responses to the endless provocations of existence, the quality of attention you bring to this moment, the words you choose tomorrow, the kindness or cruelty you offer to the world. This is your kingdom. Small, fierce, utterly sovereign, everything else belongs to the vast territory of not up to you. Your reputation lives in the minds of others as ungovernable as weather. The past is fossilized, unchangeable as stone. The future remains fog, unknowable despite your desperate attempts at prophecy. Other people's thoughts, the economy's fluctuations, your body's inevitable aging, the traffic tomorrow morning, all of these are external events, as indifferent to your will as the ocean to the desperate commands of someone drowning in worry. Your insomnia reveals how often you violate this boundary, how much energy you waste trying to colonize uncontrollable territory with your restless thoughts. You lie here, rehearsing conversations that may never happen, trying to solve problems that exist only in the realm of possibility, managing disasters that live exclusively in the theater of your imagination. You have appointed yourself supervisor of a universe that was never hiring. Tonight let us perform a gentle act of renunciation, not giving up, but giving over what was never yours to carry. Picture yourself standing on a quiet beach as twilight deepens into night. The sand is cool beneath your feet, the rhythm of waves steady and ancient as heartbeat. Beside you rests a small wooden boat, empty and waiting. In your hands you hold heavy stones, each one carved with a worry that keeps you awake. Pick up the stone marked "My Career Trajectory." Feel its weight, its rough edges cutting into your palm. You can do excellent work tomorrow, show up with integrity and effort, but the ultimate outcome, promotions, layoffs, the mysterious machinery of institutional favor, this belongs to forces beyond your small sphere of influence. Place it gently in the boat. Pick up the stone engraved "What They Think of Me." This one is particularly heavy, isn't it? You have carried it so long that your shoulders have curved around its weight. But you cannot control their thoughts any more than you can control the tide. Their opinions are weather in minds you cannot access, storms in countries you will never visit. Place it in the boat with infinite tenderness toward yourself. Continue this ritual with each stone, the past mistakes that replay with merciless precision, the test results you await with held breath, the political landscape that fills you with helpless rage. Whether I sleep tonight, yes, even this belongs in the boat, for sleep comes as grace, not conquest, arriving only when you stop trying to seize it by force. The boat sits low in the water now, laden with everything you have been carrying as if it were your responsibility. These burdens are real, they matter deeply, but they were never yours to fix through worry. Now, with the gentleness you would show a frightened child, push the boat away from shore. Feel the wood slide against sand, then catch the current as water takes its weight. Watch it drift into the darkening sea, carrying all those concerns into the mist where they belong. It grows smaller, a silhouette against the horizon, then a speck, then nothing. The ocean has swallowed it whole, and you are left standing on the shore of what you actually control, suddenly lighter, the air easier to breathe. What remains is surprisingly small but infinitely powerful. You can choose how to interpret tomorrow's events. You can decide whether to meet rudeness with dignity or descend to its level. You can cultivate gratitude for what exists rather than resentment for what is missing. You can tell the truth when lying would be easier. You can show up for your own life with attention and care. This is not resignation, but strategic withdrawal to defensible ground. You are not abandoning responsibility. You are reclaiming energy wasted on phantom battles, redirecting it toward the quiet work of shaping your own character. The general who tries to defend every inch of territory spreads forces too thin and loses everything. The general who identifies the crucial high ground and fortifies it well can hold against vastly superior numbers. Your nervous system, confused by modern culture's insistence that you can and should control everything, resists this surrender. It fears that releasing the fantasy of total control will cause everything to collapse. But look closely. Hasn't everything been falling apart precisely because you are trying to hold what cannot be held? The endless mental rehearsal of disaster has not prevented disaster. It has only created nightly catastrophes in advance, making you live each feared future twice. The boat has drifted beyond the horizon now, carrying your burdens into the deep waters of acceptance. The world will continue its ancient rhythms whether you worry or not. Your heart will beat, your lungs will breathe, the earth will turn through space, all without your supervision. You are permitted, finally, to set down the impossible task of running the universe. In this release, in this acceptance of your limited but real power, sleep becomes possible. Not because you controlled it, but because you finally stopped trying to control what was never controllable in the first place. The tide comes in, the tide goes out, and you, standing on the shore of your small sovereign kingdom, can finally mercifully rest. The clock on your nightstand glows with accusatory precision, 3:47 am, and you calculate automatically, if you fall asleep right now, you might manage 4 hours before the alarm's violence tears you back into the performance of competence. But this calculation itself becomes obstacle. Each minute that passes subtracting from your already insufficient rest, creating cruel mathematics of exhaustion that accelerates your wakefulness. Time, which seemed infinite in childhood afternoons, has become your tormentor, slipping through your fingers like water while you lie paralyzed by awareness of its passage. There is particular cruelty in how the clock behaves at night. During daylight hours, time scatters in all directions, dissolving into notifications and small tasks. But now, in darkness, each digit lands like verdict. You are failing at the simplest human task. You cannot even sleep. The sensation is not merely of lost rest, but of being perpetually too late for a departure you somehow missed. Behind on an imagined timeline you constructed in youth when you believed 40 or 50 would arrive with accomplishments that never materialized. Seneca understood this peculiar torture intimately. In his letters, he returns obsessively to time's paradox, how life feels simultaneously too short and too long, depending on how consciously we inhabit it. He watched wealthy Romans squander decades on trivial pursuits, then rage against mortality's approach, as if they had been robbed of something they never actually possessed. From this observation came his radical diagnosis that still cuts through contemporary panic. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Modern life has infected time with sickness Seneca could not have imagined. Your phone contains infinite entertainment, each option promising fulfillment while delivering only peculiar emptiness of hours evaporated into scrolling. The algorithm knows your weaknesses better than you know yourself, feeding precisely calibrated doses of outrage and envy that keep you engaged while your actual life passes unnoticed in the background. We have become miserly with money yet lavish with time, giving away hours to people and activities that leave us emptier than before. Yet here is what transforms this accusation from condemnation to liberation. We don't lack time. We waste it on other people's priorities and meaningless activities we mistake for living. The person who complains they have no time for reading has hours daily for social media. Time is not scarce. Attention is. Presence is. The willingness to be fully where you are rather than perpetually elsewhere in imagination is the rarest commodity in a world designed to fragment consciousness. He practiced living each day as both first and last, approaching morning with wonder of someone seeing sunlight for the first time, while simultaneously treating evening as if it might be his final sunset. This is not morbid, but clarifying. When you truly internalize that this day is unrepeatable, triviality becomes intolerable. You cannot waste morning on resentment when it might be your only morning. Consider the hours you have labeled wasted, the years in wrong career, the months in bad relationship, the afternoon spent staring at nothing. Your internal accountant marks these as losses. But what if those hours were not wasted, but necessary? What if the soul requires fallow periods, empty spaces where nothing is produced, and that emptiness itself is the point? You have internalized capitalism's metrics so deeply that you judge your existence by productivity standards designed for machines, not humans. The past is dead. This is not cruelty, but liberation. Every mistake, every missed opportunity exists now only as memory. And memory can be released like bird from cupped hands. The energy you spend revisiting those scenes, rewriting that history, prosecuting yourself for choices made with information you no longer have, this is time truly wasted. Presence sacrificed to unchangeable past. The feeling of being behind is illusion created by comparing your internal timeline to external metrics that have nothing to do with your soul's journey. Flowers do not bloom late or early, they bloom when they bloom. Your life is unfolding at exactly the pace it must. The detours were necessary lessons, the pauses were necessary rest. Nothing has been wasted if you are here now, aware and willing to learn. The future is unborn, existing only as probability and imagination. Tomorrow will arrive as today, single moment requiring navigation, and you will meet it with whatever resources you possess in that moment. No amount of midnight rehearsal will change this. What remains is now, this breath, this heartbeat, this sensation of sheets against skin. The present moment is the only time that exists, and it is always sufficient. Your insomnia might be your soul's rebellion against life lived everywhere except the present. So tonight, release the ledger of lost hours. Stop calculating how much remains. The gentle rhythm of your breathing is not productive, generates no content, accomplishes nothing, and that is precisely why it is sacred. Time is not thief but teacher, taking away everything eventually to teach us the value of what remains. In this moment, there is no rush, no deadline, no schedule to keep, only the gentle, rhythmic unfolding of being, carrying you softly toward the rest you deserve. The screen beside your bed glows with accusatory light, 3:23, illuminated in cold digits, while your thumb moves in familiar patterns across glass, scrolling through curated lives that feel like glimpses into a parallel universe where everyone else has mastered the art of contentment. Faces smile from carefully cropped photographs. Captions declare triumph over struggles you recognize but no one names directly. You are surrounded by hundreds of digital connections, thousands of potential conversations, yet the silence in your room carries a particular weight that all this connectivity cannot lift. This is the peculiar loneliness of our age, not the clean solitude of the hermit, but the crowded isolation of being perpetually seen, yet never truly known. You perform competence through carefully edited sentences, maintain relationships that exist primarily in notification form, speak in the shallow vocabulary of status updates, while the actual texture of your inner life, the midnight fears, the quiet desperation, the confusion about how to live, remains hidden behind filters and pleasant facades. 2,000 years ago, in the marble corridors of imperial Rome, Seneca understood this hunger for authentic connection. His letters to Lucilius were not philosophical treatises written for posterity, but intimate correspondence between two minds committed to the dangerous work of examining life together. Lucilius was younger, ambitious, struggling with his own anxieties about career and mortality. Seneca was older, wiser, yet equally vulnerable to the terrors of political life under Nero's increasingly paranoid rule. Their friendship was not built on shared entertainment or mutual complaint, but on shared pursuit of wisdom. Two people standing back to back in a hostile world, defending each other against despair. This is what you long for, lying there in the darkness. Someone who sees your struggles clearly and chooses to remain. Someone who understands that your midnight wakefulness is not personal failing, but universal human condition. Someone who can sit at the edge of your bed, literally or metaphorically, and say, I know. I have been there. You are not strange for feeling this way. By engaging with these words tonight, you are entering what philosophers call the great conversation, a dialogue about how to live that has continued across millennia. When you recognize your own experience in Seneca's descriptions of restlessness, when his insights about anger and fear speak directly to your condition, you join a timeless community of seekers who have wrestled with these same demons. You are not isolated anomaly, but continuation of ancient human pattern, connected to every soul who has lain awake wondering how to bear the weight of consciousness. Yet here is Seneca's challenging paradox. To be good friend to others, you must first learn to befriend yourself. Loneliness and solitude are different countries entirely. Loneliness is poverty of self, the ache of disconnection, feeling unseen and unknown, using others as distractions from your own unbearable company. Solitude is richness of self, cultivation of internal companionship, practice of being present to your own experience without constant validation from outside sources. The friendship you seek begins here, in learning to speak to yourself with the gentleness you would offer a struggling companion. Can you acknowledge your fears without being consumed by them? Can you treat your racing thoughts not as enemies to be silenced, but as troubled friends who need patient listening? What are you afraid of? You might ask yourself in the darkness. Why does this hurt so much? It's okay. I am here with you. We will get through this. This internal dialogue is not narcissism, but necessary foundation. You cannot give what you do not possess, cannot offer authentic presence to others if you are perpetually fleeing from yourself. When you develop this capacity for self-companionship, external relationships transform. You stop demanding that others complete you, fix you, validate your existence. You can be genuinely curious about their experience rather than using them as mirrors for your own insecurity. Tonight, imagine Seneca sitting beside your bed in the darkness, not as marble statue of ancient wisdom, but as friend who understands the peculiar torture of consciousness that will not rest. He too felt his mind turn against him in quiet hours, churning through political anxieties and philosophical questions. He offers not solutions but solidarity, not answers but companionship in the questions that keep you awake. You are not alone in your aloneness. Across time and space, others have walked this path of midnight vigilance and found their way through. This very moment of reading, of being met in your struggle, is proof that connection transcends circumstances, that friendship can exist between minds that never meet in flesh but recognize each other in the territory of shared human experience. The conversation continues, ancient and immediate, and you are part of it now, no longer isolated but joined to the timeless dialogue about how to live, how to bear difficulty with grace, how to find meaning in the face of mortality. In this communion of minds across centuries, surrounded by invisible company of friends both living and dead, you can finally allow the loneliness to soften into solitude, the ache to transform into acceptance, and sleep to approach on quiet feet. Your problems tonight press against your consciousness like pages held inches from your eyes. The ink blurs into illegible darkness, forms lose their edges, everything appears overwhelming and insurmountable. The argument with your colleague replays with surgical precision, each word magnified until it fills your entire field of awareness. The deadline looms like a cliff edge, the unpaid bill, the difficult conversation awaiting tomorrow, the sense that your life is somehow malfunctioning in ways you cannot repair. All of these concerns crowd so close to your face that they block out everything else, including the sky. This is the tyranny of proximity. When you stand too close to any problem, it becomes your entire universe. Seneca, navigating the suffocating intrigues of Nero's court, where a single misstep could mean exile or execution, discovered a practice that transformed claustrophobic anxiety into spacious calm. When the walls of circumstance pressed too close, when immediate concerns threatened to crush his peace, he would perform a peculiar act of philosophical imagination. He would rise, not physically, but in consciousness, ascending from his body through the villa's roof, floating up into the atmosphere until Rome itself became miniature, then speck, then invisible against the vast indifference of the cosmos. Tonight, let us practice this together, not as escape from your problems, but as recalibration of their true proportion. Feel yourself beginning to lift gently from the bed, like smoke rising from incense. You pass through the ceiling of your room, and suddenly you can see your entire dwelling from above, the roof or apartment building, the street below with its scattered lights, the neighborhood spreading in geometric patterns. Already, the problem that felt world-ending has shrunk. From here, you can see it is contained within 4 walls, occupying space no larger than your bedroom. Continue ascending. The city reveals itself now, thousands of lit windows, each containing someone lying awake with their own private catastrophes. Traffic moves along arteries of light like blood through veins. You realize with strange comfort that your suffering is not unique but utterly ordinary. In this very moment, countless others are rehearsing their own arguments, nursing their own wounds, convinced that their particular pain is the center of the universe. Rise higher still. The curvature of the earth becomes visible. The atmosphere, a thin blue film wrapped around rock spinning through void. Weather systems swirl with majestic indifference. Storms that will reshape coastlines, hurricanes that care nothing for human schedules or anxieties. From this altitude, nations dissolve into continuous landscape. The office where you suffered today's humiliation is invisible, less than dust mote in the vast machinery of planetary existence. Push further into the dark. The solar system spreads before you, planets wheeling in their designated orbits. The whole elaborate dance, occurring in silence so complete it makes your bedroom seem deafeningly loud. Earth becomes pale blue dot, barely distinguishable from surrounding darkness. Everything you have ever known, everyone you have ever loved or feared, every triumph and disaster of human history, all of it contained on that fragile sphere suspended in the vastness. Beyond even this, galaxies spinning like whirlpools in the cosmic ocean, light traveling for eons across distances the human mind cannot truly comprehend. Your career anxiety? Your relationship struggles? The shame burning in your chest about words spoken in anger? Against the backdrop of cosmic time and space, these dissolve like morning dew under the rising sun. This is not nihilism but perspective, not dismissal of your pain but proper proportion. Your struggles are real, they hurt genuinely, require navigation, deserve compassionate attention. But they are not the totality of existence. They are weather in a small courtyard, while above stretches endless, serene sky. Seneca used this practice to dilute his reactions, to create space between stimulus and response. When everything feels urgent, nothing actually is. The universe will continue its ancient rhythms whether you solve tomorrow's problem or not. Your particular configuration of atoms, briefly conscious and worried about performance reviews, is cosmically insignificant, and that insignificance is liberation, not condemnation. Now gently begin descending. The galaxy shrinks behind you. The solar system comes back into view. Earth grows larger, blues and greens emerging from darkness. You can see your continent, your country, your city resolving from abstraction into concrete geography. Your neighborhood appears, your street, your building, your room. You settle back into your body with profound gentleness, feeling the weight of flesh and bone, the rhythm of breath, the texture of sheets against skin. But something has shifted. The problems are still there. They did not disappear into space, but they have been right-sized. They are challenges to navigate, not existential threats. They are weather, not climate. They are temporary disturbances in the vast field of your existence. From the view above, everything softens into proportion, and in that softening, sleep becomes possible at last. You are still here, breathing, aware, held by forces older and stronger than your worry, drifting safely in the great, silent ocean of being. There is a particular exhaustion that settles into your bones when you witness the world unraveling in real time through glowing screens, each notification arriving like shrapnel. Every headline confirming that systems you believed were permanent are revealed as fragile as spider webs in hurricane. Winds. The news cycle flickers against your consciousness like a strobe light in darkness, disorienting and relentless, inducing that specific nausea of living through historical collapse. Political discourse has devolved into tribal warfare. Climate reports grow more apocalyptic with each passing season. Truth itself seems negotiable, consensus impossible, and the institutions that once provided structure now appear as hollow facades, barely concealing the chaos beneath. You lie in darkness, carrying not just personal anxieties, but the heavy, ambient dread of watching everything fall apart while feeling powerless to stop it. This is the peculiar torture of the thoughtful person in troubled times. You cannot ignore the suffering, cannot retreat into willful ignorance, yet every attempt to engage feels like trying to hold back an avalanche with your bare hands. The question that haunts your midnight hours is ancient. What is the point of trying to be good when the world is burning anyway? Seneca lived at the epicenter of such a world. Nero's Rome was not merely decadent, but actively diseased. A moral abattoir where senators betrayed lifelong friends to save their own skins, where the young emperor who began with promise transformed into a monster who murdered his own mother and burned the city while composing poetry. The institutional corruption was not abstract political problem but immediate existential threat. Justice was a farce, power the only law, and virtue often a death sentence. Any day, Seneca's integrity could be rewarded with forced suicide. Yet from this crucible of civilizational decay, as he watched the Republic's ideals calcify into empty rhetoric while Rome descended into madness, he articulated something that reaches across 2 millennia to speak directly to your despair: virtue is its own reward. We act rightly not because we will succeed in fixing the broken world, but because acting rightly is the only thing that remains entirely within our control when everything external crumbles. This sounds like platitude until you feel its radical implications. You have been carrying an impossible burden, the belief that your individual goodness must somehow counterbalance systemic evil, that your recycling will reverse climate change, that your vote will restore sanity, that your careful arguments on social media will penetrate the fortified walls of ideological certainty. When these efforts fail to produce visible results, you conclude that virtue is meaningless performance, that trying to be decent in indecent times is naive at best, complicit at worst. But Seneca invites a different calculation entirely. Your character is not an investment portfolio where virtue must accumulate measurable returns. It is not a strategy for winning games rigged against you. It is the one territory where you retain absolute sovereignty regardless of external circumstances. The inner citadel that no collapse can breach. No tyrant can colonize. No catastrophe can confiscate. Consider the tree that continues growing even as the forest burns around it. The tree does not calculate whether its growth will prevent the fire or restore the woodland. It grows because growth is its nature, because the impulse toward life persists even when death seems inevitable. Your virtue is similar, not strategy, but essence, the expression of who you choose to be, regardless of outcome. When you speak truth knowing it will be ignored, you are not failing. You are maintaining your integrity in circumstances that cannot touch it. When you show compassion in a world that rewards ruthlessness, you are not being foolish, you are cultivating your character in the only laboratory that matters, your own conscience. Modern despair often stems from confusion between influence and control. You cannot control whether civilization survives its current crisis. You cannot force others to care about what you care about, cannot single-handedly reverse trajectories set in motion by forces vastly larger than yourself. This lack of control feels like impotence, and impotence breeds the paralysis that keeps you awake, or the rage that exhausts you further. But influence and control are different currencies entirely. You cannot control the forest fire, but you can help one person find their way through smoke. You cannot fix the political system, but you can vote with integrity and treat those who disagree with basic human dignity. You cannot reverse climate change alone, but you can live according to your values rather than abandoning them, because perfection is impossible. These small acts accumulate into character, and character is the only thing death cannot take from you. Your insomnia tonight might be your soul's refusal to accept meaninglessness, its insistence that how you live matters even when the world suggests otherwise. This refusal is not naive but necessary, the quiet rebellion that no collapse can touch. The alternative leads not to peace but to deeper despair. Cynicism, moral relativism, the abandonment of standards because maintaining them requires effort when effort feels futile. But here is what transforms exhaustion into energy. You are freed from the impossible task of saving the world before dawn. You are liberated from the crushing responsibility of fixing everything, permitted to focus on the only thing you actually control, who you are in the face of what happens. This is not selfish withdrawal, but the only way to remain capable of helping anyone. The person who burns out from despair serves no one. The person who maintains their inner flame becomes a beacon for others stumbling through darkness. Worry is not work. Anxiety is not activism. Lying awake, terrified by headlines, does not reduce suffering or heal political divides. It only depletes the energy you need to do actual good in your actual life. Tonight, ask yourself the questions that matter. Did I act with integrity today? Was I kind where I could be? Did I face difficulty with courage? If the answer is yes, you have succeeded, regardless of what the news says. If the answer is no, tomorrow offers another chance. Even if empires fall, even if the climate shifts beyond recognition, even if institutions collapse entirely, the value of good character remains absolute. A diamond shines equally bright in a palace or ruins. Your capacity for reason, for love, for dignity, these are invulnerable to historical circumstance, as eternal as the stars that shine indifferently over both flourishing civilizations and their ashes. So let the world spin in its chaotic orbit tonight. You cannot steady it with your sleeplessness. But you can steady yourself. You can choose, right now, to be a person of peace in a time of war. A person of reason in a time of madness. In this choice lies your freedom, your dignity, and finally your rest. The world may be broken, but you need not be. You are still here, still capable of virtue, still holding the inner flame that no wind can extinguish. And in the sovereign territory of your character, small but unconquerable, that is enough, more than enough. It is everything. There is a certain silence that visits in the deepest hours of night, not the comfortable quiet of earlier evening, but something heavier, more knowing. It carries the weight of truth your daylight hours successfully avoid, flowing like an underground river beneath all your surface anxieties about careers and relationships and tomorrow's obligations. In this profound stillness, you feel your heart beating against your ribs with startling clarity, and suddenly understand with visceral certainty that this faithful drum carries a finite number of beats. The darkness whispers what you spend your waking hours forgetting. You are going to die, and everyone you love is going to die, and all your accumulated achievements will scatter like ash in wind. This is the fear beneath all fears, the wound that never heals, the fact your mind circles endlessly without ever examining directly. Seneca did not flinch from this reality. In the marble corridors of Nero's increasingly paranoid court, where death could arrive with any dawn, he returned obsessively to mortality, not with morbid fascination, but with the steady gaze of a physician examining the root cause of human suffering. When the final order came in 65 AD, when Nero's madness finally demanded Seneca's execution, he faced forced suicide with such composure that witnesses trembled more than the condemned man himself. This was not natural gift, but cultivated capacity. Decades of daily meditation on mortality had stripped death of its power to shock. To practice death is to practice freedom, he wrote. A man who has learned how to die has unlearned how to be a slave. Modern culture has sanitized death, hidden it behind hospital walls and euphemisms, creating the illusion that if we simply don't think about it, we can somehow avoid it. But this avoidance breeds the very anxiety that keeps you awake now. When you refuse to acknowledge mortality, it haunts you from the shadows, manifesting as endless worry about preserving what cannot be preserved, controlling what cannot be controlled, securing what is fundamentally insecure. Your midnight terror stems not just from the fact of death, but from a lifetime of denying its reality. Tonight, with infinite gentleness toward yourself, let us invite this fear into the room and sit with it like an honored, if severe, guest. Imagine death not as a cloaked horror, but as quiet, patient presence taking a seat beside your bed. There is no threat in its posture, no malice in its face. It is simply waiting, as it waits for all things with the profound patience of natural law. When you look directly at this presence, distorted fears begin to lose their monstrous form. You have already experienced non-existence for eons before your birth. Were you suffering during the Renaissance? Did you ache through the medieval period? Of course not. You were simply absent, and that absence was neither painful nor frightening. Death is merely returning to that same state of peaceful non-being, the natural completion of a cycle that began without your permission and will end without your consent. Consider what specifically terrifies you about mortality. Is it the pain of dying? The loss of consciousness? The worry for those left behind? Seneca reminds us that most of what we fear is not the event itself, but our reaction to it. The anticipation of death almost always exceeds its reality. You are afraid you will not be able to bear the unbearable. Yet examine your own history. How many catastrophes have you survived that once seemed impossible to endure? Sleep itself offers nightly rehearsal of this surrender. Each time you close your eyes, you release conscious control, trust your body to continue without supervision, dissolve into darkness and return renewed. You have practiced letting go thousands of times. If sleep restores rather than terrifies, perhaps its permanent cousin deserves less dread than you imagine. The contemplation of mortality is not depressing but clarifying. When you truly accept that your time is finite, trivial concerns lose their grip. Would you spend your final day in resentment over an email? Would you waste precious hours scrolling through strangers' curated lives? Death strips away illusion and illuminates what actually matters. Did you love well? Did you act with integrity? Did you face difficulty with courage? Did you show up for your own existence with attention rather than destruction? Your mortality is not punishment, but gift. The deadline that makes everything precious, the constraint that forces prioritization, the reminder that this moment is all you actually possess. The past exists only as memory, the future only as imagination, but this breath, this heartbeat, this sensation of sheets against skin, this is real, immediate, yours. So let the fear rise if it must. Acknowledge it, examine it, see it clearly as the truth that makes life valuable, not despite your finitude, but because of it. You are temporary, fragile, mortal, and in your very temporariness lies your preciousness, like flowers that bloom more beautifully because they fade. The darkness in your room is not cruel, but honest, asking only that you stop pretending you have forever. Stop postponing authentic living. Stop waiting for perfect circumstances that will never arrive. In this acceptance, this profound yes to your own mortality, the fear that keeps you awake begins, finally, to transform into peace. Not because death has disappeared, but because you have stopped running from the only certainty in an uncertain world. Sleep comes easier when you befriend the fundamental nature of existence. Rest arrives when you accept that you are beautifully, perfectly, gloriously temporary, just like the stars that will eventually burn out, just like everything that has ever existed or ever will. You are mortal. And that is enough. More than enough. It is everything. Picture the scene with perfect clarity. An aging Seneca sits by the trembling light of an oil lamp, the rest of his villa surrendered to the profound silence that only arrives in the deepest hours of night. Outside, Rome breathes in troubled dreams. Distant footsteps fade along cobblestone streets. Voices dissolve into darkness, and the eternal city settles into that peculiar stillness that feels both peaceful and ominous. Inside, the small flame carves a circle of gold from the surrounding shadows, illuminating his weathered hands as they move across papyrus with deliberate precision. "I am writing this not only to you, Lucilius," he admits in one letter, "but to myself. It is a confession both simple and revolutionary." These intimate correspondences, carried by messengers across the miles separating Rome from Sicily, were never meant to survive 2 millennia, yet they speak directly to your condition lying there in the darkness. They reveal something profound about the nature of wisdom itself. Advice becomes confession, instruction becomes mirror, and in the act of counseling another, we discover we are really counseling the confused, frightened aspects of our own consciousness. You know something of this fractured interior, don't you? Part of you lies exhausted, pleading desperately for rest. Another part continues its relentless interrogation of the day, cross-examining each choice like a prosecutor who never rests. Somewhere deeper, there exists a quieter self watching all this unfold, observing your anxiety with wistful sadness, wishing it could reach through the noise to offer comfort. That inner witness is the one Seneca wrote to across the centuries. And it is the one you can write to tonight. Modern culture has taught you to outsource your inner dialogue to glowing screens, status updates cast into digital void, private messages seeking validation, fleeting comments, hoping someone will respond with understanding. But the silence that returns, or the shallow responses you receive, only deepens the feeling that no one truly sees you as you are in these midnight hours. You seek external witness, because you have never learned to witness yourself with the philosophical precision that transforms chaos into clarity. Seneca's letters offer a different model entirely. They are not emotional spillage or unedited rants, but shaped reflections, anxieties named with precision, failings acknowledged without self-contempt, ideals articulated not as rigid demands but as guiding stars. He transforms amorphous unease into language, and in doing so robs it of some of its terrible power. What can be clearly said can be gently handled. Tonight, you need not take up pen and paper literally, though that would be a sacred act if you feel drawn to it. Even in imagination, you can begin this philosophical correspondence. Picture a blank page before you and start simply, dear friend, addressing yourself with the tenderness you reserve for others but rarely offer your own struggling consciousness. This creates something extraordinary, externalization of the chaotic internal monologue that keeps you awake. The racing thoughts that circle like vultures inside your skull become visible, transformed from overwhelming internal pressure into manageable external object you can examine with some distance. The anxiety that felt like your entire identity reveals itself as merely one voice among many, loud, insistent, but not authoritative. What would you write to yourself in this moment? Not performance for imagined audience, not curated wisdom for social media consumption, but honest reckoning with what you are actually experiencing. I am afraid you might begin. I lie awake night after night, and the exhaustion compounds until I feel I am drowning in my own mind. I don't know what to do. I feel trapped between impossible choices, exhausted by the effort of simply continuing. There is profound relief in naming the struggle plainly, without euphemism or minimization. Your letter need not solve anything immediately. It need only witness truthfully what is happening in the territory of your experience. This act of witnessing, of seeing yourself clearly and recording that seeing, is itself transformative. You are no longer lost in the storm, you are the consciousness observing the storm, describing its characteristics, noting its patterns. Now respond to yourself as you would to a dear friend in similar circumstances. Step into the role of your own philosopher, your own Seneca, accessing that part of you that remains untouched by the storm, capable of observing the waves without drowning in them. You have been here before, you might write back. Remember 3 years ago when the situation seemed impossible? You found your way through. You always find your way through. This too is survivable. The practice creates dialogue between different aspects of yourself. The part that suffers and the part that can hold suffering with compassion. The voice that panics and the voice that soothes. The consciousness that drowns in problems and the consciousness that maintains perspective even in difficulty. You become both Seneca and Lucilius, both the wise elder and the struggling student, discovering that the wisdom you seek externally has been developing internally all along, waiting only for the right form to emerge. Over time, these letters accumulate into an archive of your becoming, not the curated highlight reel you present to the world, but the actual texture of consciousness learning to navigate difficulty. You can return to earlier correspondence and see how problems that felt catastrophic resolved themselves, how fears that seemed permanent eventually dissolved, how you have survived 100% of your worst days so far. This practice also reveals patterns invisible in the moment. Perhaps you notice that your anxiety spikes predictably after certain activities. Perhaps you discover that what you call depression is actually exhaustion from living misaligned with your values. Perhaps you realize that the voice telling you you're failing is not objective truth but internalized criticism that no longer serves your growth. Writing to yourself creates the friendship Seneca and Lucilius shared, mutual encouragement toward wisdom, companionship in the difficult work of examining life, someone who sees your struggles clearly and chooses to remain. But unlike external friendships that depend on others' availability and understanding, this friendship is always accessible, always patient, always exactly calibrated to your needs, because it emerges from your own deepest knowing. Tonight, you need not compose anything elaborate. But imagine the letter you would write if you did. What comfort would you offer? What have you learned from previous sleepless nights that might ease this one? The letter exists already, unwritten but present, waiting in the space between your racing thoughts and the peace you seek. Sleep now, it might conclude with infinite gentleness. Nothing requires your supervision until the sun returns. You have done enough. You are enough. Let the darkness hold you. Let the silence be comfort, not threat. The correspondence can continue tomorrow, but for now, the page is turned, the ink is dry, and you, both writer and reader, both Seneca and Lucilius, can finally, mercifully rest. You are not alone in your aloneness. You carry within you both the one who suffers and the one who can hold that suffering with infinite tenderness. In this intimate philosophical friendship with your own consciousness, The lonely vigil of insomnia transforms into communion with your deeper wisdom. And sleep becomes possible at last. The oil lamp in Seneca's villa burns with its final breath now, flame drawing smaller and smaller circles of gold against the encroaching darkness. The papyrus lies finished beside him, ink dried into permanence, the last philosophical argument complete. Beyond the shuttered windows, Rome exhales into night, distant footsteps fade along cobblestone streets, voices dissolve into silence, and the eternal city settles into that profound stillness that feels both peaceful and infinite. The storm of the day retreats into memory. It is time to put down the pen. You are here with him and with yourself in this final borderland between waking and sleep. The fortress stands secure. The citadel is defended. You have walked through the corridors of anxiety, examined the architecture of fear, built walls of reason against the chaos of circumstance. The work is done. Nothing more requires your vigilance tonight. The problems you carried into darkness, they will be there tomorrow, or they won't, and either way you will face what comes with whatever resources you possess in that moment.
All philosophy points toward the same truth. We are temporary. Everything passes. This wakefulness will end as all moments end. The empire rose and fell and the world continued. Turning your worries tonight will dissolve like morning mist. Thoughts arriving more slowly now, like leaves drifting on a dark, slow-moving river. You need not climb aboard, only watch them float. Smaller, softer, further put on. Sleep is practice of letting go, surrendering control, trusting processes larger than yourself. Oh, your heart knows how to beat without supervision. Your lungs remember breathing even when you forget. Yeah, if it's carrying you swiftly through the darkness. You need not hold yourself together. The you.
Seneca writes his final words and then he sleeps. The rain that fell on Rome falls on your window too. 2,000 years collapse into this single breath. In and out, the rhythm, older than language, older than worry, older than the names we give our fears. The letters are written and read, and now the page goes blank, blank like the space between thoughts, blank like the moment before sleep arrives. You are drifting now. Can you feel it? The subtle shift from waking to something softer. The edges of consciousness growing fuzzy, dissolving. Nothing requires solving tonight. The boat has drifted beyond the horizon, carrying your burdens into deep waters, and you remain on the shore, lighter now. So
waking and sleeping, effort and release, holding on and letting go, everything moves, everything softens, everything rests blank, 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 the space between words growing wider, thoughts arriving like birds settling into trees at dusk, one by one, finding their branches, folding their wings, growing still, so still now, so quiet. The lamp is out, the philosophy is finished, the night holds you, you are drifting into the great silence where all things rest, where Seneca rests, where you finally, mercifully rest.